That's where we are. I have a business. That's kind of not why I'm on here. However, my business is helping people to write books. And what has happened to me, I'm actually writing a book about. So this is why I thought, right, I want to get out there and I want to talk about it. Because I know, like you say, it's a subject that's just gone so far out into we hear about it all the time, but I guess everyone feels the same. You didn't think it had ever happened to you.
Absolutely, yeah. Because when you end up in a narcissistic relationship, it can be very tough. So take us through the genesis of this,
Mm,
Samantha. What type of relationship was it, and how did
yeah.
you get involved in this type of relationship?
Yeah, so I'd chosen to be single for about 10 years. I'd had once upon a time, a long time ago, I was married, had a son. He's grown up. Relocated to live by the sea, following my dream, my business, writer, living by the sea, just amazing. And and I just started to think, oh, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time. Maybe I would like to meet that special someone to share my life with. I'd got friends, I had a good life, I had a thriving business. And I don't know, something changed in me. Anyway, so I embarked down that path and into the dating world again. Wow, what a shock that was. 2024 dating. Oh my God. The online dating world is like just crazy. So I kind of like had 6 months of that, navigating that madness. I went on quite a few dates and most of them were very sort of, what shall I say, unsuitable for different reasons. Um, the people that I did meet, yeah, not for me. Many people I didn't meet was introduced to the world of like ghosting and all of this kind of thing. I really noticed a shift between, I mean, online dating was pretty tough 10 years prior to that, but I really noticed a shift in the behaviors and just like how people think it's okay how they can treat you online, and yet they probably wouldn't do that in person. It was quite bizarre. So I had all these experiences, and then I was about to give up actually, and I did actually cancel my subscription I was using, the Bumble app, because that was sort of like more for women at that time. They made the first message, things like that. So I was using that, and then something in me, I call it my intuition, told me to actually, Sam, let's just have another go, but just like change a few things up in your profile. And I help people to publish books, write and publish books. And something we do with the algorithm for Amazon publication is like keywords and niches and things like that. And something in me was like, right, try that for this dating, and see if I sort of get a better choice of man on this dating app. And I did that. And it did seem to throw a few different sort of like people up that I'd not met before, seen before online and stuff like that. So anyway, I got talking to three different people, arranged three dates for over a weekend. The first one was a no-go. The second one, who I thought would be probably the most promising candidate, that never happened that date. And then the third person I met, I had a feeling that was going to be friends only, but that turned out to be the date that turned into, well, the fiance. And but things moved incredibly fast, incredibly fast. When I look back now, at the time I just went with it because I am that kind of person. I get told all the time that I move through life and business pretty fast at quite a speed, but that just to me just feels natural. So nothing about this situation actually felt that unnatural to me. Like I say, because I go at speed with things, but to other people it did, including my son. He was like looking out for me, and I guess I get it. It's like I'd been single for all those years, and all of a sudden I'd met this person, and literally within, what would it be, 2 weeks? I know it just sounds crazy when I say it. 2 weeks, this person had moved into my house, my home. And as I'm saying that, I'm like, what? Because you hear someone else say that and you think, what were you thinking? But it felt so natural. It felt so natural. I didn't have any concerns about it because it felt so right. So that there just shows you what I've learned about since, and about mirroring, how well the mirroring was done to me to make me feel we were so compatible, so alike. Everything just felt so as it should be. And we were going to be this couple forever, like the whole soulmates type thing. The first date was, wow, the first date went on for about 19 hours. It was not your regular date at all. It was sort of like, it was meant to be in a coffee date, and it turned into like an overnight stay. It was like in like this hotel setting. And then we didn't see each other for a few days because I was going to see my son. But within that time, we were just talking continually. And I was being fed a lot of sort of like compliments and, let's say, promises, but talking about, we were just, all of a sudden, I was no longer single. I'd met him. That was it. We were an item. We were an item. And it was like, it was kind of overwhelming, but not overwhelming. It was just a mixture of so many things. But all I ever remember thinking is it felt so right. So again, I didn't question it. I suppose I felt I fell head over heels. I'd met the right person finally. And when I was thinking back to the dating experiences before that, I ran up to meeting him. It was like when you did sort of like a bit of a comparison, it was like, wow, well, he's nothing like that. And I think one thing that really kind of impressed me at the time, with how flaky people seem to be these days in terms of not wanting to commit, the ghosting thing. I'd been stood up twice and I'd never had that happen before, never experienced that. And just generally disappearing after a few messages, all of this, he was the absolute opposite. He was wanting to commit straight away. Both of us came off the dating apps. That was it. We were an item. And I think at first I saw all of these things as major positives. But then I fast realized, well, not fast realized, that's the wrong word. Later I realized, actually, no, this was the start of like the controlling, coercive behavior. And I think I can see why it's very easy to get that blurred at the start.
Let me ask you then, because you mentioned a few things I wanted to touch on. One was Bumble. I think a lot of people use dating apps, especially over the last couple of years. And I've always made this joke. Whereas gone are the days where you'd go to the farmer's market, the woman drops her handkerchief in the middle of it, you pick it up, you guys go on the ferry, and you're married. 2.5 kids, white picket fence, dog named Sparky, the American dream, right? So many of us chase happiness, and instead of the American dream, we get the American nightmare. And the nightmare can be the abuse, it could be the controlling, it could be the manipulation. But one thing that I have noticed is that at that point in time, when they meet that person who's going to be their potential abuser, they're telling them everything that they wanted to hear, either from their childhood or at that moment. What were some of the things that you were being told that made you feel like, wow, this person is saying this about me? I've always wanted to hear these things.
Yeah, well, probably it was like that wanting to commit. So that was giving me a feeling of like real trust very quickly. This person felt certain about me. They weren't going to mess me around. Some of my top values are like loyalty, trust, integrity, all of that was really felt like it was demonstrated to me, and I had no doubts on those sort of like points whatsoever. That just felt so secure. And I can remember thinking that even when things started to seep through a bit later on behavior wise, I was always like that felt unshakable. Well, no, this person's really loyal. This person, I can really trust them. They'd never do anything to like hurt me like that. That was that reinforced within me. Unbelievable. And but it was things more like, so something that was used in a big way was trauma stories. Okay. So him sharing stories with me. Now, to most people, even to me actually, but to most people on a first date, hearing some trauma stories, it's not what you expected. It'd be a no-go. I think when I've looked back on this, I think with the work that I do, I'm often working with people with trauma stories. So I think, and often quite, they can be quite shocking stories, quite extreme. But because I've done this for quite a long time, I think I kind of almost normalize some of the things that I hear. And I'm a big empath. I'm very compassionate, and so I was hearing some of these stories told to me, and I was empathizing, but at the same time, I was being encouraged to share things. And this was even on a first date. Again, it was all very subtle. It wasn't like really, wasn't done in a forceful way or anything like that. To the point where it all again felt natural. It was just like, it was just telling me something that had happened. It wasn't making a big deal out of it. And it was played down. It just all felt very natural. And so but I do remember thinking, I don't really want to talk about that on a first date. And then I was like encouraged to say, sort of prompted me a bit more. And so I just shared a little bit, but not massively. But as time went on, that actually I heard more and more of his stories, and that really helps to, well, it makes you feel like you've connected, and a bond is formed. And actually, that, for all I know, that might not have been true, some of that stuff, but I took it as that, because again, I know manipulation was done on me so well, the mirroring at the start, because I just never ever thought I couldn't trust this person until right near the end.
Did you, or did you think, or looking back, do you think that what that person was giving to you was what you wanted at that point in your life?
I'd always I'd always want that from a relationship for sure. Yeah. I wouldn't want any relationship really. I think, friendships, business relationships, anything, kind of trust is like the foundation really, isn't it? And certainly for like loyalty, I wouldn't say it was something like I was like really looking for. I think it was like I'd closed my heart off to the idea of a relationship for so long, and then opened it back up and embarked on this dating. It was almost like a part of me remembered, oh, yeah, maybe I've been missing out on quite a big area of my life for a long, long time. And so, yeah, I would be definitely seeking that trust and that loyalty for sure. Yeah.
I've heard that from other men and women who have been in this relationship is that they were seeking something that they felt was always escaping them. That serious
Mm.
relationship, that long-term relationship, that marriage, just even someone saying that you look nice today because maybe they've gone weeks, months, or even years ever receiving a compliment. This is why so many people who are narcissistic, what do? They love bomb you, right? Oh, you're beautiful, you're gorgeous, I love you. Are these some of the things that you heard?
I did, but again, I never would have thought that was love bombing. Because again, it wasn't done like in a really over the top way all the time. I don't know, maybe the idea I'd heard of like the term love bombing Like having gone back into the dating world, you hear it a lot. And I suppose it conjured up a certain image for me, and that wasn't it. That wasn't it. That just again felt really normal and kind of genuine. It felt really nice. And it was like, oh yeah, again, like you say, I don't know, I haven't had anyone speak to me like this for quite a long time, because I'd literally just shut myself off from that. I'd focus very much on like growing my business, being a good mom. I'd got my son through his A levels, going to university, and then he was like in the working world, so to speak. So my focus had been elsewhere anyway. But yeah, it was kind of like something I guess I really wanted that once I'd opened my heart up to it. And I remember those feelings, thinking, gosh, I have shut all of this out, and how lovely this is. And the one thing I always used to keep thinking was like, how lovely is it to feel like you've met your forever person? And I used to have that sort of like, that used to be in my mind quite a bit, because that was very much replicated from him. Again, everything I know now, like they talk about the future faking and things like that, there was a lot of that going on. Again, not in a big wild way, but just very much like going to be part of the future. He was telling me things about, like we went to visit areas where he grew up, and showing me like where he lived as a young boy and things like that. So I very much felt part of his world in quite a deep way. And we we used to have in the early days some like really deep conversations, which is hilarious when I think about it now, because he couldn't stand that part of me. Like, I'm quite a deep person, and actually he really resented that. And so it was like, at the start he was kind of like pretending to be everything I was and what he thought I'd want, and actually he was probably very, if any of those things, but I had no idea about that.
What helped you to recognize the signs of narcissistic abuse?
For the first year, so after let me go back a little bit. So after the first couple of months, we had to move out the home I was in, the rental I had at the time. We had to move out of there, and things really started to change after that. But by that point, within those 2 months, my goodness, I thought I thought I'd met my future forever person that I wasn't about to give up. And as crazy as that sounds as well, but it's like I felt so certain about him, and everything seemed really lovely. However, his behavior started to really change once we'd moved. Um, and I was immediately like starting to think, basically, what the hell's gone on here? And I was trying to figure out what had happened to the man that I met. Where was he? I'd see him, but then he'd go, and I started to see some quite kind of ugly behavior coming out. And he excused all of that with he was basically, so I was really into a lot of self-development and manifestation type things. I was really into that in a big way, and doing a lot of like work, deep inner work on myself and things. And I was in some programs at the time that I was doing, and I always do something like that alongside my business, because it's just like goes hand in hand for me. And he insisted he wanted to like be involved in that. He wanted to do everything I was doing. He wanted to be with me all the time, which again, at first seemed, it's that committing thing. And it's like, oh, that person that, you've fell in love and they want to be with you all the time. How lovely and sweet is that? Well, that soon, changes later on. You see it more for what it is. And I felt suffocated. And it was kind of like, but he was insisted he wanted to do this stuff with me. And of course, he then was using that as an excuse of, this has lifted the lid off of all my old trauma stuff, and all of this anger and nastiness and hate basically was spilling out of him. But I was to blame, because I'd I was like doing these programs, and he insisted he wanted to do it, but I was to blame. I was very much to blame. And this was all my old stuff, all his old stuff that's coming out. So on one hand, I was like trying to support him and help him with that. And on the other hand, he was like blaming me because he couldn't cope with it. So it was like, it was really, really, really stressful. And I was like, what has happened here? Where's all the fun gone and everything? It was like all of a sudden I was navigating something really different. And we were living together still, and in this new place. And I was like, what is going on? The behavior became very confusing because I'd have the loveliness 1 minute and then I'd have this other person, and it became very sort of Jekyll and Hyde. Not for 1 minute did I think it was abuse or narcissism or anything like that. But I started to venture out and looking at relationships and things like that. And I was in a few groups I joined on Facebook about relationships and things. And I thought, well, I've been out of one for so long. Let's just see what other people are saying about this kind of behavior. And I very much came upon like about the attachments, like an avoidant attachment. And everything I was hearing about that, it really met that. And so like the dismissive and fearful avoidant. And I guess to me, to some degree, I was bit more on the anxious side. And it really seemed, I started to listen to a lot of podcasts and things about that. And it really seemed like, this is what this is. So I tried to talk to him about that, which wasn't easy. But it also made a lot of sense, bearing in mind all of this trauma stuff he laid at my door and told me what he'd been through in the past. And so I was like, well, maybe you could get some healing for that. And eventually he did. He agreed to that. He had some healing, some therapy, and claimed it was helping him. And I started to see him softening. And so I was over the moon, delighted with that. But at the same time, as that was happening, I really was struggling with the behavior in him because he changed so much from at the start. I saw glimpses of that. And I've heard so many people say you spend most of your relationship trying to get back the person you met at the start. And that was so true. But every single day I was crying, near enough every single day of my relationship, I cried. There was this real sadness going on that was pouring out of me. And I'd often cry silently and quietly because that used to just make him so angry. And if he thought it was anything in connection with him, that would be, he'd get really angry about that and couldn't handle my emotion at all. But I just had this sadness that was pouring out of me. And so I started to have therapy. I started to have therapy to deal with what was going on in the relationship and to manage that behavior. So we were both having therapy and it seemed to be helping him. And then we had to, there was a few obstacles in our world in what was going on both sides. And so came the point when we eventually had to move again. So it was all very unsettled. Everything was so unsettled. There was, I won't go into too much detail on it because that's just a story on its own, but it was like, there was a lot of unsettlement behind the scenes as well. And it was like, when I stepped back to have a look, sort of after about the year mark we were together, I was like, my life's really changed. And not really in a good way. But I felt I still really loved him. I could not imagine being without him, but my life's really changed. I've made some decisions that I probably wouldn't normally have done. And I started to see like quite a possessiveness and a jealousy coming through with him as well. And at times he could get very angry. And that was becoming really, I found anger and dealing with sudden anger and sudden change like that. I find that very hard. It made me very anxious. But again, it was like I felt powerless to do much about it. And I think now I was going into like a bit of a fawning type sort of response to cope with it all. So when I look back on it now, so it's like about 2.5 years ago, this is when I was talking about, and I don't know, it just feels like another lifetime ago, and it feels really surreal. Because when I was like in the thick of it, because then after that, the next year just got much worse. And it was just really some really bizarre behaviors. And I was just in this like state of confusion all the time. I got really, really confused. Didn't know which way was up some of the time.
That's some of the difficulties of those types of relationship is the confusion because you're one person who wants something. And then you're a second person who has it now, and you're thinking, this is my, to use your words, my forever person. We are going to live forever. We're going to outlive time, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And then shortly afterwards, you're like, wait a minute, this is not the person who I thought he or she was. This is not the type of relationship that I work so hard on myself to
Mm-hmm.
obtain. Right. And then when you see these signs, some people can turn into, okay, what did I do to deserve this? Some people could turn to say that, why am I in this type of relationship? What did I miss? What didn't I see? Um, and then another person can be that, well, someone out there is loving me regardless of how it's showing up and what form of abuse. What type of thoughts were going through your head as you were in this relationship? You realize what it was, and now maybe you're trying to leave it or figure something else out.
Yeah. Well, at that point, sort of about a year in, just over a year in, I still didn't recognize that as abuse. Not at all. Not at all. I I was still on the path of like the dismissive avoidant type behavior. Um, and but then after we had to move again, relocated again, which was hugely stressful and then when we'd moved, I'd say that it was about the first 6 or 7 weeks after moving, those first 6 or 7 weeks, I just felt such hate. And that's a strong word, but absolute hate from this person. It really was like it really ramped up. And we'd moved to an area where I didn't know anybody. Well, I knew one person. I didn't know that person at that point that well. I didn't know anyone. I'd left all the friends I'd made in this area I'd relocated to. I'd left all them behind. My family were in another area. My son was in another area. So it's incredibly isolated. And with this hateful anger, and I'd helped this person start a business and grow a business. But because it wasn't performing and had become sustainable, I couldn't keep supporting this person financially either. That was another big bone of contention. And so I know that he blamed me. I was very much blamed for having to give this business up and had to go back and get a job. And so, the hate I felt from that. And it was as though I'd done something, really terrible. And I just like in that year, my mental health really went downhill and his behavior just got worse and worse and worse. It was like he no longer had to really bother that much. It was like got me away from that area where there was people that we knew each other and everything. And I only realized later on in that time there that I think I was deliberately isolated here. I thought it was like due to this other circumstance was going on, but it was like made so much sense because it was like so jealous and possessive of me being with anyone or relationships of any kind, like friendships, relationships with my son, my family. He always wanted to be part of everything. Obviously, feel left out. I was accused of having affairs, everything, and just everything. And the behavior really ramped up. lots of shouting, and it became, I guess, what they call a bit more overt then. There was a lot of sort of like verbal name calling, which I found really shocking. I found that really shocking. And then later on, this person that I vaguely knew down there, well, I was seeing her a lot, and she was just like an absolute godsend to me. I don't know how I'd have got through those months without her. But she was saying to me, she said to me once upon a time, she said she was getting really worried about me. And are these the actions of a loving partner? And something about that phrase just really stuck in my head. And I was like, no, they're not. None of these actions are of a living partner. And I think gradually, very gradually, because it was so painful to face it, never mind accept it, I was like, this is not normal. This is not right. There's something more going on here. Still wasn't calling that abuse. Never been in a position like that before. I guess there was no real physical. There was nothing really physical. There was one occasion where he'd gone to raise his hand and it looked like it was going to hit me. And I said, basically, you dare do that sort of thing. And all I know is the next day I was just so shaken up. But there was nothing really physical. So, and there was nothing, there was verbal, there was a bit of name calling, but everything else was just so subtle. It was like I could sense it was very sort of passive aggressive. There was like I felt like this simmering resentment all the time. But because things were not really that out there, it felt impossible to put any kind of label on it as what was going on. So I still didn't know what was going on, and I felt incredibly confused. But I knew I wasn't sleeping and things like that. I hardly ever slept that well at all in the entire time I knew this person. Prior to that, I'd had pretty good sleep, and since then I've had pretty good sleep. It's like my body knew almost straight away it couldn't relax. And yet my mind was not allowing me to take on those messages on board, because it was like, oh, but I've got this forever person. Well, we've come this far. Those thoughts of we've come this far, we've gone through so much already. I can't just throw the towel in now. I'm not a quitter person. I try and make things work. But there's making things work, and there's just like going to those lengths. And I just started to feel I was putting up with more and more that I shouldn't be. And then the anger and resentment was building up in me as well. So, yeah, it started to become a lot more toxic. But one thing I just wanted to share this because one thing I know, things could have been a lot worse. I mean, they were bad enough in how it all panned out. But one thing could have been a lot worse. But prior to this, I'd done like loads of work on myself over the years. Lots of self-development. I had therapy when I was younger because I went through quite a lot when I was a young person. So I'd really grown as a person and really into self-development. And and one thing, I made a pact with myself, and it was like, whatever's going on here, and whatever may happen going forward, one thing you're not going to take from me is my self-esteem, right? So even though I felt like my confidence ended up getting really battered because I was constantly being sort of very subtly put down and dismissed and things like that, I can honestly say I still held that truth about who I was. And, he wasn't going to take that from me. And I did stand up for myself quite a lot still in that relationship. I wasn't sort of like, even though I was like going into like a fawning response to cope with certain situations, I could also be quite feisty, and I would answer back and things like that, which I don't know. I think it was my anger driving me at the time. So maybe I didn't present typically. I don't know, but I don't think different situations. I think even like when I've read about abusive situations, I probably didn't always maybe react as I thought I would, but I think you're just doing what you can in the moment to sort of get through it, to survive it. Yeah.
Why do you think, looking back, you didn't call it what it seems like it was, meaning you didn't call it abuse?
Because I honestly did not see it as that. I honestly did not see it as that because it felt like there was nothing concrete to go on. There was not like he'd also have a way of like saying things like, so if he ever said anything like really nasty to me, it wasn't like he was name calling me all the time. Like I say, it was a lot more subtle. But if he ever did say anything where he was like name calling me or putting me down, I would often call him out on that. And then I'd get it thrown back at me, and I'd be like, one thing he used to say is like, I'm very PC. Oh, you're so PC, or you're so perfect. So it was that whole manipulating me on that. There was a huge amount of manipulation going on. And it would be like gaslighting me, I guess. And it would be like, I was like, okay, so yeah, you're being what I'd call like quite a nasty person, but I still didn't label it as abuse. It's strange. And it was only when I had a friend, a really good friend, a really old friend. Um, I was heading towards probably like almost 2 years into the relationship, a bit before the 2 year mark. And every time we spoke, she was getting more and more concerned about me. And I wasn't like opening up massively to her, but she could just see signs because she'd been through something very similar herself for a long period of time. And she just said to me one day, she says, Sam, she says, you can do this. Is in the UK. I don't think this is in other countries. And they might have an equivalent, but she says you can do a Clare's Law, Sam. So this is do you know what I mean through that? A Clare's Law.
I think so, but for those who may not know, can you explain that as you telling the story, please?
Yeah, sure. So it's through any police station you can go to, and I did it all online. And it's like if your partner, or you can do it if you're concerned about someone, anyone you feel concerned about, that there may be something in their past or something you need to know about them, whether they may be abusive. You can fill out a form. It's all done confidentially. And then if the police then assess it, and if they think there's anything you need to know about that person that they're able to disclose, they will do. They'll contact you, and then they'll let you know that information. And so I kept thinking about it for a couple of days. I couldn't get it out of my head. And I just knew. So the whole time I was in the relationship, apart from right at the start, I knew it was my intuition. I can see it now. I didn't realize at the time that there was something gnawing away at me all the time. Every day I'd be like, what is this? What's happening here? There's like this confusion. It was like I say, nothing felt black and white. I couldn't put a label on anything. And so I thought, right, I'm just going to do it. And as soon as I'd done it, so much anxiety around it. And then it was just over 24 hours, the police came back to me and they had things to disclose. And sorry, it's a critical moment. My cat is meowing. Could I just go and let her out the room? Is that okay?
I think sometimes one of the beautiful things about having the support to help you through a difficult moment is that they can see things that maybe we can't see. It's like they're reflecting on the reality where sometimes we're living in the fantasy, such as like your friend who was in a similar situation and she was here and this person was able to guide you to let you know that there's steps that you can do, there's things that you can find out, and there's action that you can take. The moment you decided to leave this relationship, what was your thought process and how did you come to that step?
It took me quite a while to get to that point. So I did I heard this disclosure. There's lots of unpleasant things in this disclosure. But even that wasn't enough to make me leave. And I remember the policewoman, and they signposted me to an abuse charity. And I remember a woman at an abuse charity saying to me, "Is this not enough for you?" But it wasn't. And that's when I realized, find out a lot more about trauma bonding and the horror of the trauma bond. And so, yes, that was horrifying, finding out everything I did. But I still stayed with that person for 4 months because I wasn't ready to leave. And when I hear people saying, it's like, I would have thought that myself in the past, I'd be like, well, why are they still with that person? But I think unless you've been through it, it's really hard to understand. And it felt impossible to leave. The trauma bond was literally feels like I was going to die if I left that person. It's literally like a threat to my life. And I understand now that was my nervous system and everything, what I'd become accustomed to. But I then started to really ask a lot of questions. I was very, very distressed. And I was like, who the hell is this person I'm living with then? I was engaged to them. Who are they? And I started to look on their phone, something I'd never done. But I was desperate for the truth, for answers, and started to do a bit of detective work and stuff as well. And yeah, saw a lot of things, found out a lot of things that for me then felt tangible, real evidence. I've seen it with my own eyes. There were, persons lying a lot of the time. They're not the character. They're not the person I can trust. They're not loyal. They're not any of those things that I thought they were, and that I'd held so solid until that point. And I then started to, an abuse charity was supporting me, and I was talking to them. And it was very much, I spent sort of like 4 months gearing myself up to leave this person. And that was like really hard. They were probably four of the hardest months of my life. Really, I went into a very dark place. And that was just this year. I went into a very dark place. I was very depressed, had no motivation. But also the anger in me was building up, of this person and their behavior. And in the end, I was trying to leave them. I came to stay at my parents, and that was my first attempt at leaving them, but I just couldn't, because I still felt like this. I was going to die feeling without that person in my life. It was just, logically, I knew everything they were now, and I wasn't safe or anything. And the police had done assessments on me, and it was deemed high risk, and I was advised to leave and everything. And I still felt like I couldn't leave this person. It was like, it sounds crazy, and it feels it when you're in it, but it's unexplainable. But then in the end, I came back from about a week away, and they then started to love bomb me again. But this time I knew what they were doing. And it felt almost, part of me still liked that, but part of me found it sickening as well. Everything just got so mixed up and confused in my mind. But I knew I was going to leave. And then they couldn't keep that up. And after that sort of 48 hours, they turned really nasty with me. And I had sort of 24, 48 hours of them being absolutely vile. And the behavior really ramped up as well. And they were doing really weird stuff, like really like prodding me, poking me, mocking me, laughing in my face, right in my face, and just really, really bizarre behaviors. And that really freaked me out. I was like, it's having some kind of like mental breakdown or something. But it was like, I think it was like doing what they call a reverse discard to try and get me to end and walk away from it. And in the end, I'd locked myself in the bathroom one Monday morning, after I'd come back, and then the behavior changed again. And I was frightened. I was in the bathroom, they were banging on the door, being really aggressive with me, and I was just like, and I just thought, right, as soon as you've gone to work, that's it. I'm leaving you. And I did. I spoke to a friend. I rang her up because we talked a bit about it for a while, and she'd said, I'll help you if anything I can do. And I whizzed around about 6 hours, packing up as much as I could. And then later that day, when I was safe at this friend's house, I just just by text message, because it's the safest way to do it, out of their way. And I just said, you've got 48 hours to leave, and with you get yourself out and all your belongings, because the rental was in my name. And so I was able to do that. And yeah, it wasn't particularly pleasant, and it was heartbreaking at the same time, because I still felt I had feelings for that person, but I could no longer do it. And I had weeks where I was obviously sobbing, but then I was like, I knew one thing it had really done as well, the controlling behavior is, sorry, I realized the time, I've been talking for ages, haven't I? The controlling behavior had really been impacted on my business. There was been a lot of control around that, trying to control the hours I worked, what I earned, all of that kind of thing. And that had radically, my income had really gone down. And I was like, gosh, like, what else is going to happen? How, everyone needs income to survive on. So it's like, that's being drained away from me as well. It's like action's got to happen. So that was another thing that really prompted me into walking away as well, because it's like, I'll have nothing left. I'd already got into a lot of debt through all of this, and it was like, right, I've just got to wrench myself away. But I'd been listening for months. I'd been listening to loads of podcasts and videos and all kinds of things from people talking about this. And I very much identified with everything they were saying about the covert narcissist behavior, without a doubt. And as soon as I'd spoken to the police and the abuse charity, they were using the words perpetrator. I was in domestic abuse situation, all of this stuff. And it was just like, that was just so shocking to me at the start, to enter into that world of that. But I fast realized, and I had to admit to myself, it's like, no, that's who this person is. They were never the person I thought they were at the start. And I'd been grieving the entire relationship, trying to get that person back. And I knew about the trauma bond and how painful that is. But as long as I still had that going on, it's going to be really hard to break away. And so I'd been listening to all these sort of coaches and narcissistic abuse, etc. Been listening to them for quite a few months, which had really, really helped me to see, this is manipulation, this is Darvo, this is what you're doing here, blah, blah, all the things. And then I started to listen. There's quite a few out there now. They call themselves self-aware narcissists. And maybe a bit of a weird approach, but I found it was brutal listening to them. But that massively, really quickly helped me to break the trauma bond, because I was hearing it from people who were owning up to what they'd done, how they'd behaved before, and just hearing that and how deliberate it is, how the harm to the intention there. And I could just relate to it all. And I thought, this is absolutely how I felt, that this is what was going on from their point of view. And it was really brutal and painful. But for me, I'm quite an all or nothing person. And I just think, pull that facade off. Let's just face it. And I think I quickly was able to, recognize exactly who he was. And the more I just kept telling myself, every time I felt I was going back, being pulled back into that romantic illusion, I was like, no, remind myself. I'd go and watch one of these videos and I'd be like, no, that's who they were. Because I saw it all for myself. I saw the true them, but I was ignoring it for the longest time. And I just owned it. And I was just like, no, this is who they are. And they're actually enjoying it. And they're choosing to do that. But seeing his enjoyment at the end, there was this gleeful look in his face. I'll never forget it, in his eyes, this glee, this excitement at abusing. And I was like, wow, that's just, and then that person just started to feel really distant from me. And I just went completely no contact straight away. had to go through like I was trying to get a non-molestation thing through the courts, but that was a nightmare. He contested that. I was called the abuser. Again, I've found out that's like a really common thing to happen, using the driver against you. But it was just, yeah, that was really stressful. But then I've moved completely away from that area and that physical distance. Honestly, within the last 6 weeks, I have come on so far. My business has really picked up. I'm thriving again. I'm laughing. I feel radically different. I've connected back to me. And I've been doing a bit of sort of somatic type healing as well, to like try and calm my nervous system to what had happened. So yeah, that's kind of like my story in a nutshell.
You mentioned, Samantha, some of the emotions that you experienced, one of them being anger. You mentioned the different ways that it showed up in your body, such as your nervous system and how that react. And then you also mentioned your professional impact, that your business was suffering and your income decreased. So I want to tie this all into this one final question I want to ask you. And for this question, I want to give you 3 wishes.
Okay.
What are 3 things you wish people knew in how their life would change after leaving a narcissistic relationship?
Three things. Three things are, it feels literally impossible to do it. Like you're going to die, like I've described, it really does feel like you're going to die. But actually, you don't, obviously, you don't. And actually, that feeling, I think if you embrace healing and embrace the truth, by embracing the truth, you can actually lose that connection quite quickly. Because I've heard of it going on for years for people. And I was like, I'm not going to suffer for any longer than I have to anymore. I'm kind of done with this. I need to get this very toxic person out of my life and away from everything. And so I was like, yeah, watching these videos just massively helped me with that. And then the other thing was, I'd very been quieting down my voice. I'd stood up for myself, but I'd quashed a lot of my feelings and my voice. And so the antidote to that is like, right, I'm going to use my voice again. And this was a massive key part in my healing as well. I very, very quickly started to speak about this on social media. Not in a nasty and vindictive way, just in a truthful, honest way. I had to get it out of what had happened to me without naming names or anything like that. But I had to get that out because I know if I'd have kept that in, I would not be anywhere near healing like I have, because all those feelings would have been pushed back down inside of me. And so I did that, and that was so empowering. And I was so supported by people, my connections on social media, it was incredible. And I actually had people reach out to me as well and say to me, this is what I'm going through, something similar. And so even just trying to be able to help them a little bit was just amazing. So that's 2 things. And I'd say, yeah, the third thing, I guess it was something that I chose to do while I was in it. And that was like, I was really stubborn about you're not taking my self-esteem, because I felt like everything else was being taken away. And I just thought I'd worked so hard for years on my sense of self that I was like, no one's going to take that from me. And so I was really quite bloody minded about it. And even though he did his best to destroy me, and my confidence was really not my actual core belief about myself, I didn't allow that to be really affected in ways I know it can and does for a lot of people. Kind of make a pact with yourself, perhaps. Make a pact with yourself. Maybe if you listen to this and you're still going through something now, think about what you have left right now. Make a pact with yourself. You're not going to let that person take that. Because if someone takes your self-esteem, that's kind of everything, isn't it? It's like your self-worth, your self-belief. It's just who you think your self-worth. You can't let anybody drain that from you.